All right. I am bringing you behind the scenes of me jumping into a coaching group of another unbelievable coach, a coach named Mike Baer. Mike Baer is Dr. Phil's coach. He is amazing in all ways. And so since I am coaching his private coaching group, I decided that I would teach what I taught my private coaching group last week to his private coaching group. And I'm going to bring you behind the scenes because, well, one, I think it's a conversation that every single one of us needs to hear. And I'm hopeful that if you find anything valuable in this, that you might consider jumping into coaching with me. I'm going to drop the coaching that I do into the chat. I'm going to pin it to the top. It's at a thing called Growth Day, this amazing new platform that has myself, Brendan Burchard, Mel Robbins, David Bach, Jenna Kutcher, a whole host of unbelievable teachers that when you sign up for coaching, you get access to every single person's coaching. Someone goes live in coaching Tuesdays and Thursdays. I am the first Tuesday of every single month. So I'm going to give the coaching conversation that I gave last week to this group, Mike Baer's private coaching community tonight. It's about an hour-long conversation about facing fear. How do you build confidence in the midst of change? How do you approach anxiety, what might happen? How do you approach planning, preparedness, what can happen? And how do you process the inevitability that we are all going to die? How do you process mortality motivation, the permission to fully live when you know that our time here is limited? So I'm going to walk through this. If you are interested in sticking around, it's about an hour-long conversation tonight. I have some homework that I'm going to be giving to everybody as we go, and I am excited for it. And if you like something that you see here, my biggest hope would be that you would share it with someone that you think could get something from this, because everyone is processing change. We are all going through some things. I am going to save this live, so if you miss part of it, you're not able to see it, I'm going to give you every opportunity to watch it again or share it with a friend. But I'm excited about this. In a world where I have been in the hunt for fulfillment and looking to fully use the intention of my creator, I feel like I found it in being able to do work like this, having conversations with people that maybe change a little bit of how they think about unlocking their full potential in their own life. So we're going to dive into what might happen, what can happen, what will happen. I will show you. They're doing a real quick meditation inside of his group. Inside of that group, there's about, let's see, it looks like there's 370 people inside of his group getting ready to have me drop some knowledge on them, and I'm excited about it. If you're just jumping in, I am teaching tonight inside of another coach's private coaching experience. There's a guy named Mike Baer. He is the coach of Dr. Phil. You know Dr. Phil? I know Dr. Phil. But he is the coach on Dr. Phil. He's an amazing guy, New York Times bestselling author. He was the first person to endorse my last book, Get Out of Your Own Way. And we have become friends. I just had him on the podcast last week. It'll air pretty soon. And when it does, I'm excited for everyone to be able to hear him in person. All right, so he's about to bring me on. Sit back, buckle up. Let's go.
Some of you may struggle during meditation and getting centered, and everyone authentically has their own way of self-regulating.
Mike's awesome.
And getting into the connection.
Just dropped everybody through a meditation, got them in the right state of mind.
There's infinite forms, so
take a few
make
seconds.
sure you do whatever works for you and just keep doing it because it works. And also, before I forget, big celebration is one decision made New York Times best-selling, made number 5 in the business category.
All right, he's talking about something else. I don't know what it is, but it is something to celebrate. Someone inside of his group has made a New York Times bestsellers list. I am here for this.
We're holding it up in the empowerment group. You all have been really supportive.
You're asking, am I nervous? I am not nervous. I am excited.
Thank you all for being a part of that.
You know what's interesting? Nervousness and excitement are the exact same emotion. So when you feel that thing, I feel that thing, but when you feel it, you can decide, is it excitement or is it nervousness?
New York Times
I
bestselling
am
author
excited.
right now, and that's Dave Hollis, who's going to kick things off. Make sure
Here we go.
you have a pen and paper handy, by the way, because Dave said he may give some people some things to write out, may give you some homework.
Get some pen and paper out. You hear, Mike?
Take some notes.
I have commanded these humans that I am speaking to be ready for some homework. It is time, people.
Incorporate into your life. So I am going to turn it over to Dave Hollis, who I believe is in Austin, Texas. Hey, Dave.
Hello, Mike.
Hello. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, man, I am excited to be here. Mike, I hope you're okay with this, but I'm going live on my Instagram as well because I wanted to bring more humans into the glory that is your community, but also I want to share this message today with as many people as possible. I hope that that's okay.
Let's get this party started.
Let's get this party started. Oh, Mike's got his sunglasses on. He's wearing tie-dye. Ladies and gentlemen.
That's how we roll.
Thank
you so much.
Well, hey, thank you. I just, everyone inside of Mike's group, you know how amazing Mike is. I will admit, Mike and I have been friends from afar for quite a bit of time. And it wasn't until just this last week when I had him on the podcast that I was able to experience the awesomeness personally. So, the things that you do in helping other people are only upped by how generous and decent you are in person. So I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for bringing me in to get to know some of your people, become friends in real time with this crew. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
All right. So as Mike said, get your pen and paper handy, friends, because my intention today certainly is to have a conversation, but I am most interested in making sure that you can take something very, very tangible from the work that we're going to do for the next hour. I have a handful of papers. I will hold them up at a certain point. When I do, I'm going to ask that you mimic a little of what I've written down so that when we finish this conversation, you can actually take it as homework and do the work so that you can have some breakthrough in how you will inevitably try to handle building confidence inside of change, how you will handle working toward not erasing fear, but having the confidence to walk through it, because we are all collectively experiencing a lot of change that is challenging our confidence, right? So if there's a headline to this conversation today, it is this, that change challenges confidence. And by show of hands on the Zoom, how many people can say that they're experiencing change in the last year? If your hand is not up, you're a liar. Every single one of us is experiencing change. My goodness, right? All of us are experiencing change. 2020, if nothing else, introduced unbelievable disruption with the global pandemic. It challenged us to confront social unrest. It tested us with a presidential election. And in doing so, for all of us, for me included, it upended our sense of normal. It triggered questions about our identity. It could have seen some of us feeling a little bit more alone. Anyone feeling a little bit more alone in a disconnected world, right? I'm feeling a little more alone in a disconnected world. There's more division in the sea of rhetoric that we're all swimming through. And now it's leaving us with questions of what normal is really worth rushing back to, right? It has us wondering who we are now if we're not who we have been, right? Like I am in real time going through a lot of identity stuff that has me asking, who am I now if I'm not this person that I used to be? We're scrambling to fight for connection, sometimes, most of the times inside of a pandemic in the most unconventional ways, and are trying our best to find something in the realm of unity, right? That's why you're here today. Group of like-minded human beings reaching for something collectively, it brings us together. And the crazy thing is, right, 2020 in so many ways introduced a new game, and 2021 in many, many ways is just 2020 with a mask on. I don't know if you were like me, had some hope that the strike of midnight on January 1st was going to introduce something new, something different. But really, we are just experiencing more of the same. And we're experiencing a constant of change being what will exist in this new normal. And it's a normal that's very, very different from what we knew, say, a year ago around this time, before we were introduced to something as crazy as the world that's changed in front of us. So the game being changed begs a question. What do you do when a game changes? And the answer is, when the game changes, you have to change the playbook. The playbook is as relevant as a VCR is to my kids. It's irrelevant. So the work that we have ahead of us in this conversation today is to try and find ways to meet the challenge that has come to us, rather than trying to use the old playbook in a world that is not the same as it once was. This change will challenge our confidence. And if you're feeling not confident, I want to first just start by normalizing this as a signal and sign of your humanity. It is not by any means a signal that you're not enough, not worthy, not good, not whole. It means you're human. I'm struggling with my confidence and I'm awesome. But it's just a thing that inevitably ends up happening, and it's going to continue to happen unless we can think about how to create a different kind of playbook to address, preempt the way we might react to being triggered, right? Triggering our anxiety and worry of what if and how long, that's a thing that's been happening over time. And it really ends up begging some better questions around what can happen, what kind of preparation might be necessary. That's part of what we'll talk about today. How do you fortify your confidence by having a plan when the things that might happen do? And how can you also tap into the inevitability of not being on this planet forever, right? How can we, and just acknowledging that our time here is limited, see that as a permission slip to live fully into the calling that we've been given, the intention of a creator that uniquely put something inside of you in a way that may make you scared, make you fearful of fully pursuing it. But man, what if we could be free from that? So the thing that we're going to talk about, the frame that I'm going to walk you through today, is the idea of what might happen, what can happen, and what will happen, right? The worry of what might happen, a thing that we hopefully can push aside. The question of what can happen, trying to build a plan to prepare for it, and the guarantee of what will happen, knowing that we will not be on this planet forever, giving us a mandate to step into who we were meant to be. The list of challenges in 2020, they are the change that has been put on us in some ways as a collective society. But there's also the change that we choose and the change that chooses us. Right? I'm in a season of experiencing both. I don't know every single one of you. And so for those that don't know, I'm in a season right now of the change that I'm choosing, right? You're here in part because you're choosing change. I'm choosing to grow. And the decision to grow, the decision to listen to my intuition, to reach for self-actualizing my gifts, the potential that lives inside of me, that is something that requires you to become comfortable with discomfort. The journey that I've been on, this journey of self-discovery in my last 5 years, I've summed it up with this quote that I've got right here on my arm. It's a John Shedd quote. It says, "A ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are built for." And it's a reminder that I got here on my arm that I was built for discomfort, for self-awareness, for discipline, for fear-facing, all the things that are required to move away from anything that feels comfortable into a space where growth happens. And if you, because you're here, I'm going to assume that you have some bit of calling. There's a whisper from your intuition to move into something that'll make you grow. Well, that comes with a prerequisite to acknowledge that you're going to have to do so in a way that faces your fears with that self-awareness and discipline to actually confront the choppy waters of those waves. The decision to walk away from comfort, it requires that you're going to traverse through a ravine of fear that surrounds comfort. I like to think of comfort zone as an island, right? Your comfort zone is an island, and on all sides are all of the things that you fear in this life. But what sits beyond that ravine, beyond that moat that surrounds your island, is where learning and growth ultimately exist. And it takes getting over that ravine. There's no drawbridge. There's no shortcut. You have to become confident, face those fears, and move into a place where you can learn to grow.
And Dave, and to that point, and I love what you're saying, it's very comfortable to have your ship hang out, never leave the harbor, go, oh, well, the water's too deep, or I don't know how to swim, or it's too stormy, or they don't have good food over there. I mean, we have so many excuses, right? Not to get uncomfortable. Right, Dave?
100%. Here, what's interesting is I like to think of it as there's so many of us that choose to stay with the suffering that we know because it's familiar, because we believe that there's some predictability. And in some ways, our suffering is a form of our identity. And so we tend to stick with this suffering that we know in exchange for pushing ourselves into discomfort to become free from that suffering, because acknowledging going into new places will be scary is different than staying connected to the suffering that we're already familiar with. You can be free from the suffering, but it requires that you chase your fears. It requires that you undock the ship and push out into those choppy waters. The decision for me to evolve into this better person of who I know I can be, it comes at the expense of how comfortable I feel. But I'll be honest, one of the things that keeps people anchored to the dock is that it also comes at the expense of the comfort of people around you who are accustomed to who you have been, right? They are familiar with your familiarity. They are comfortable with your being comfortable. So it might threaten them. It might trigger some worry that you'll outgrow them. I don't know if you've ever heard of a pot with crabs in it, but if a pot of crabs has one crab trying to reach the top of the pot, you know what happens inside that pot. Every other crab reaches up, pulls the crab that's trying to get ahead down. And some of you are still living inside of that pot. You've got people surrounding you that are talking you out of listening to your intuition, talking you out of leaving the suffering that you know because they're comfortable with your suffering. They don't have to live with your regret. They don't have to live with your unfulfilled potential. They don't have to live with you wondering what might have been. They don't have to be at the end of your life wondering why you're dying with all of your dreams still inside of you, right? The change that you choose, it requires that you fortify yourself with confidence in a way that has you armed to handle the new environment, right? To handle the new soundtrack that's going to be running inside your head, the new dynamics that are going to emerge in the relationships that you have with these people who are uncomfortable with you getting uncomfortable. Now, there's also the change that chooses you, right? The change that chooses you, it might be a surprise diagnosis. It might be a failed business venture. It might be like me. I'm 9 months into getting a divorce, right? A relationship that ends, a job that gets downsized. One of a million things that come out of nowhere and knock you off your path. Either way, right? Either way, when you find yourself leaving this harbor of security, of safety, of known knowns, of suffering, and you start to push out into the waters, it can come with what I would describe as a blank piece of paper, right? I was handed this blank piece of paper at the end of my marriage that I was then left to fill out what would actually be written on the rest of my life in a world where husband would no longer be a descriptor of who I was. And that blank piece of paper, if you've ever been handed one or you feel like you have one in real time, it's equal parts exhilarating and terrifying.
And Dave, can you explain for those in the empowerment group who don't know a little of your backstory is when you're talking about a blank piece of paper, so you're married and then divorced?
Yep. For those that don't know, so I had been married for 16 years. I am no longer married as of 9 months ago. And my wife and I, after I had a 25 or so year career in entertainment, moved our family from Los Angeles, where I left as the head of sales at the Walt Disney Company, to become entrepreneurs and work on a business together that was vainly named after ourselves, the Hollis Company. And we were trying to put tools in people's hands in the same way that Mike here is trying to put tools in your hands. And we built something that I am so proud of. And it, I think, affected so many people in such a beautiful way. And then it just so happened, right? We grew apart. There were parts of our relationship that didn't work. And in this decision to not be married any longer, I, never having envisioned a future that didn't have me as husband to Rachel, in a world where I didn't envision working at this company that I'd helped build called the Hollis Company, I found myself trying to figure out what it might mean for me to live in the rest of my life as Dave Hollis, now single human being, as Dave Hollis, now entrepreneur, trying to figure out how to put the gifts that I have to work outside of the context of the Hollis Company where I don't work any longer. And again, that opportunity gets me excited, gets me up in the morning, man, I got 1,000 ideas, and I am as much a human as you are. It's terrifying, and my doubt and my insecurity, and what if I put myself out there and I fail, or what if I'm not good enough to do this on my own? Those voices play as much in my head as anybody else. So as you start any journey of matter, you're gonna have this blank piece of paper. And so I want you to just be prepared for what it's gonna take to draw out something that is as wonderful a vision for what can happen, so that you can actually actualize the gifts that you have to honor the intention of your creator, right? Filling out that blank piece of paper, building that new playbook, it is the requirement for success in the New World Order. You can't depend on the old playbook. You can't depend on the words that were even written necessarily on the paper previously. So you've got to have an imagination for something big, for something that is audaciously connected to the calling and the intention of why you were put on this planet. There's this great quote. I love this quote. I've used this quote in my last book. I even wrote it in my next book. It's from a guy named Les Brown. And it is this idea that hope in the future is power in the present, right? Hope in the future is power in the present, which means that if, as you're holding this blank piece of paper, you can cast an amazing, full of imagination, audacious, true to yourself, the calling of your heart vision for what's next, you are going to be so hope-filled in the present that you're going to get up on fire for actually doing the work that it's going to take to make that vision come together, right? So you've got to be able to cast a great vision. And I will tell you, at the beginning of this journey for me, rug is pulled out. I am like, who am I if I'm not who I've been? Where am I going if this North Star that I previously was chasing doesn't exist any longer? All of the reasons why I didn't know if I could do it came back to fear. So I was given this gift, and I believe this to be a miracle. It happened, of all people, to come from my now ex-wife, who in the week of our conversation around divorce happened to, on her podcast, interview Liz Gilbert. And in this conversation with Liz is amazing, amazing author. I mean, you should listen and read every single thing that Liz has ever done. But she shared a practice that fundamentally changed everything when it came to the imagination for my writing down the best vision on my blank piece of paper. She said, write a letter to your fear. So I did. I wrote a letter to my fear, and I'm going to ask you to write a letter for your fear, to your fear, as well as a part of this exercise. But I wrote down 46 things on the back patio, out in nature, crying into a spiral-bound notebook. I wrote down 46 things. Dear Dave, I am your fear, and this is what I want to tell you. I am afraid of this blank piece of paper that sits in front of me in a world where I thought my life would go one way, and now it will go another. I'm afraid of what it'll mean to be fully and totally responsible in a world where I've always had a person that could help me be responsible. I'm afraid of doing this without the vices that I've usually turned to deal with my anxiety, my fear, my insecurity. I'm afraid of shedding my identity of what it means to be a husband now that I'm not. I'm afraid of being alone and growing old by myself. I'm afraid of how well the kids can handle this choice. I'm afraid of starting over and getting it wrong, of failing and when I put myself out there. I'm afraid that I'll never truly love myself. I'm afraid of letting go what was for what will be. I know that these are not specific to me kind of fears, people. These are the fears that all of us have because all of us are human. I wrote down all of them. And when I did, it was a miracle. I don't say that facetiously. It was a miracle because that bringing them into the light was this immediate boost of confidence because I was able to, in drawing these paralyzing insecurities out of darkness, was able to actually dismantle these fears and move forward by doing one of two things. So part of your homework, first piece of paper that I'm going to hold up, I want you to write a letter to your fear. Dear fear, I want you to write down every single thing that you think of. And then you are going to do two things. The first one is you are going to ask which of these fears are real. And what you're going to find is there's a lot of things that we're afraid of that are in fact not real. I know that everyone has probably heard fear as false evidence appearing real. But the interesting thing, when I went line by line, like 80% of them for me were totally ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. But 20% of them were warranted fears. They were good things for me to be on the lookout for. So that 80%, I just made a declaration. I wrote them out, the ones that were not real. I physically put them on a piece of paper. I crumpled them into a physical ball. I walked them to the fire pit and I lit them on fire. They're gone now. They don't exist anymore. They're gone. And when they start to come back up, I remind myself, those have been burned.
Let me ask you, what's an example of some of those fears so people can differentiate, right? Because it's very easy for people to not understand, well, that's not real, or it could happen, right? So what was your can you give some examples?
Yeah, I mean, like when the example that I would give is like, if I put myself out there, I'm afraid of putting myself out there and failing, right? I'm afraid of putting myself out there and failing is ridiculous. And the reason why it's ridiculous is I have, at 45 years old, 27 years of me as a professional adult in some capacity, putting myself out there and failing and succeeding. And so the idea that me putting myself out there and failing was something to be afraid of was ridiculous. What it took for me to do, though, was to see the ridiculousness by going back and finding evidence of how ridiculous it was. Every time I made a decision that was not ideal and grew from it, every time I made a business decision as an entrepreneur, every leadership mistake I made leading teams from 72 countries at the Walt Disney Company and was wrong, every time I got called into a human resources office or by a boss to tell me, you need a breath mint, I grew. It was a gift. And so when I was able to see, oh, this is BS, this is not real, crumple it in a ball, throw it in a trash can. Like as the journey of this journey unfolded, I realized how ridiculous it was that I would be alone. I wasn't alone from the first day, right? And so the more time that I could spend with it, the more that I was able to just really find evidence that would make any of the fears that were ridiculous unbelievable because of the evidence that existed, right? The second one, though, right? So I did completely just dismantle, throw away, goodbye, in the trash. Those are gone. Those 80% of fears. But I don't believe that all fear is false evidence, right? I think some fear is very much real and that it exists to prompt a better question that you can ask on how to prepare to do it scared but ready, right? The ability to formulate the habits and routines, the circle of support, the resources that I would need to ready myself to do it through my fear, fundamentally changed the way I felt courageous for the challenge that sat ahead. This was no longer now, I'm going to identify these things and not be scared. No, I'm still going to be scared. But I'm going to be scared and prepared in a way that allows me to face those fears and push past fear into learning, and through learning, get into growth. Because growth is really where fulfillment lives. It's where you get to unlock so much of the gifts that live inside of you. And you just have to know you've got to push your way through it. So I want you to do that work. Write your letter to your fear, and then ask the question: which of these fears are real? Bring them out of your unconscious. Write every single thing that you possibly can. If you're not crying while you're doing this exercise, you're not doing it right. You're just not being honest enough. It is emotional, confronting your fear. But once you get them on the piece of paper, then you get to decide which are real and which are not. What are the things that you can create a plan for? And we're going to get to the creating the plan piece in a second. All right, now I'm going to dive into the framework. Man, that was a long tee up. I'm glad you're still here. Everyone's still here? You good? We're all good? All right, if you've got a LaCroix, have a sip. All right, what might happen? What can happen? What will happen? All right, so let's start with what might happen. Right? There's these Stoic philosophers that have been around like 2,000 years ago. You might have heard of them, like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, dozens of others. They were speaking truths. They hold up today as much as any time. They are the founders of virtue, of ethics, of physics, of logic, and just like you, they were also human beings, and they wrestled with the same anxiety that each of us battle every single day. But to a person, these known to be wisest human beings in the history of humanity, they each have drawn a similar conclusion that anxiety is born out of this perceived fear of what might happen, right? The weight that we've given to the perception of what's possible in a way that disproportionately weighs the possibility of our worst case fears coming to pass, right? Allowing those worries of what might happen to infiltrate our thoughts, it immediately compromises our confidence. It immediately strips us of our courage, and it will keep us stuck, docked in the harbor of safety, of security, and comfort, away from growth and fulfillment, paralyzed by our fear. Epictetus said, man is not worried about real problems so much as by his imagined anxieties about real problems. It's an idea that's reinforced by Seneca. He said, we suffer more from imagination than from reality, right? It's just a weak spot in our humanity. And if you're someone who gets anxious, that makes you human. And look, I'm not in any way trying to downplay it's something that might require a psychological next step, a pharmaceutical next step, right? If you've got chronic anxiety, this is more about situational day-to-day anxiety as it pops up, right? But our minds play these tricks that run wild with these worst case scenarios that will likely never ever happen, right? They will likely never ever happen. And our mind does this in a way that keeps us stuck. I want you to grab a blank piece of paper. I'm going to have you draw 3 circles on this blank piece of paper. One big circle, one circle that's about a quarter the size of the first circle, and then one circle that's about 1/10 of the size of the third circle. Everyone see my circles? Circles? Okay. I've done the work of filling it out for you. I want you now to put in the biggest circle things I worry about. In the smaller circle, things that can happen. And that tiny dot, the less than 1% of the biggest circle, those are the things that actually do happen.
So first is things that I worry about.
Things that I worry about. Things that can happen. And these are the things that do happen. Now, the flaw in our humanity, if you can hear me from behind this piece of paper, we tend to worry about the big circle, right? We tend to worry about a bunch of stuff that can't even ever happen. It's just impossible. Statistically, if you're a math person, the odds are with you. These things don't happen. The subset are the things that actually could happen. Like they actually have a possibility of happening.
So Dave, as we're filling this out, maybe we can have a set so people can start filling in a little their circles.
Yeah.
Are you thinking?
Yeah.
Can you give a few examples that you see where when you say like things that I worry about, and people can put in their comments here in the chat box, and maybe kind of fill it up the things that you worry about. You're saying that we first want to list all those things that worry from.
Well, here's the reality is you can fill this out, not fill this out. I want to just draw your attention to the practical reality. Right? Mm-hmm. The practical reality is that humanity, our human nature, wired from survival back in the Stone Age when people were on the lookout for the mammoth that could come around the corner and kill them, was be wired to worry about things that can get you. And that wiring that's existed since the beginning of time still here, and we assume that everything that comes into our consciousness is worthy of worry. Without even asking, can this even happen? Let alone, does this actually happen? And so more than anything, I want to try and give people the freedom to release the 99% of things that you spend time worrying about because they don't actually happen, right? I mean, building confidence really starts by trying to see how few of the things that I worried about could actually come to be. And I had to couple that. At the time, I was reading Power of Now. And coupling that with grounding myself in the truth that I cannot control the future. I hate to break this to anyone who believes themselves in the power of controlling the future, but you can't do it. So I was able to loosen the grip that worrying about a bunch of stuff that I, one, don't have control over, and two, is likely never ever going to happen. It just afforded freedom to only preoccupy myself with preparing for what could happen and dreaming about how big things might be now that I'm free from having to worry about everything that I used to worry about, right? I can't change the past. I can't predict the future. The only thing that's going to have any impact on what happens next is the way that I build the confidence to handle whatever shows up today. The only thing that you can control is today. But if your preoccupation for the day is worrying about things that will never ever happen, you will not control the day. You will not show up for yourself in a way that creates integrity between who you'd hope to be. And that's where the regret and the self-loathing and the feeling down and unmotivated and shame and all of that just festers, right? It doesn't make the anxiety go away. I do think that there's like another thing that was necessary for me. I have been in the most amazing therapeutic conversation with a human being named David. When my identity was changed, I just identified as being husband first, father second, entrepreneur, business, human being, someone in personal development third. Like that, those were the kind of rank order. And now that this primary identifier was gone, I really went on this search for self. So I've been doing this therapy in self. It's a thing called internal family systems, if you're a technical human being. But it was this idea around creating a relationship with who I am and the roles that the feelings and thoughts that I have play as managers inside of my being. Right? So I'm seeing this guy, David, buying him a boat one session at a time, best investment I have ever made. And as we have been in conversation over these last 10 months, he has helped me understand that anxiety, like any emotion that I feel, is a part that believes it is playing a role. It believes that it is here to serve me. And I, when I feel anxious, am not anxious. I am an observer to the anxiety. And so the role that I have in now witnessing this part that believes it to be playing itself a role to help me is to ask it, hello, anxiety, what role do you believe to be playing here? If you've ever read the book Untethered Soul is an amazing book, and it has a lot of the same kind of stuff. You're not the voice in your head. You're not the soundtrack in your head. You are witness to the soundtrack. And so if you can disassociate you, yourself, your identity from the voice that you are listening to, if you can disassociate yourself from the feeling that you are experiencing and instead see it as a part that believes it to be playing a role, ask that part what role it thinks it's trying to play, you can make progress. For me, my anxiety exists to draw my focus to a part of my life that in its ambiguity is representing that there is a plan that could be made to make my life get from where I want to go, from where I am to where I want to go. It is saying, hey, Dave, you do not yet have a plan in this ambiguous part of your life. I want to draw your attention to it. And if you were to create some goals, if you were to get a routine, if you were to get some support, if you were to read a book, whatever it might be, you may then create some certainty in an uncertain place. And I will have served my role in helping you take one step closer to who you'd hope to become. I've reframed my relationship with anxiety because now I see it as information. It's intel, a trail of breadcrumbs trying to help me understand where I do not yet have that clarity, where I don't have a solidified plan. And if in that ambiguity, I might actually create something, I'll be more prepared for that piece of my life. The same kind of thing exists with fear and with anger and with any emotion or any thought, right? What is this thought trying to tell you? What is this feeling trying to tell you? If you can see it as helping, well, maybe you can reframe how you feel about it existing. Okay, so now I want you to think about your fear and put it into those two columns, right? The two columns, left side, what might happen, right side, what can happen. And for anything that exists inside of the what might happen, I want you to ask, Is this something that you can release yourself from? Is this something that you can be made free from? And in the second column, is this something that you need to make a plan for? Because we're going to talk about making a plan next, right? We're going to talk about that next. On my what might happen list, okay? So on that first column of what might happen, the thing that you have to do to overcome the things that you can't release is the next exercise that I'm going to hold up a piece of paper for. Okay? There's a little bit written on here, so I'm going to walk you through it nice and slow. At the top of the page, it says your limiting belief. Okay? There's 3 columns in the middle: positive, negative, and reframed. These are positive outcomes, negative outcomes, and reframed outcomes. And the very bottom of the page says your empowering belief. The reason why you can't let go of that piece of anxiety is because you are connected to something called a limiting belief. You are listening to a reason why you are not equipped to handle this thing that you cannot yet let go of. So I'll give you my example, the one that I gave to Mike, right? If I put myself out there and fail, what are some limiting beliefs that I was holding on to that made that come up on my list of fears? For me, like I will be seen as underqualified to do this work. I might embarrass myself publicly if I try and do this and get rejected for not reaching people in the right way. I might be triggered to reach for negative coping mechanisms when I feel badly about it not going the way that I'd hoped to, right? Like if I were to put myself out there and fail, I might be seen as underqualified. I might embarrass myself. I might be triggered into reaching for a negative coping mechanism. So now I've written out my limiting belief, and on the 3 columns, I had to list, if I were to fail, if I were to put myself out there and fail, what's every positive thing that could happen? What's every negative thing that could happen, right? So you just start with the positive and the negative, right? So you make a list of every positive thing. And you make a list of every negative thing. So what could happen if I fail? I could learn. I could, in raising my hand to say that I messed up on this part of trying to put myself out there, meet a person like Mike who says, oh, I've got a solution. Maybe I've now created a connection because of my willingness to identify that I've made a mistake. I thought I could do it and I can't. I got to figure out how to get a better set of resources. I might, grow because that learning that I'm getting is now giving me some intel in that failure to apply to how to do it differently the very next time. And once you have all the negative and all the positive, you're going to now reframe any of the negative. And the crazy thing, of course, is what you realize is most of the negatives can be reframed with the positive, right? You do it in sequential order because your brain tends to focus on the negative until you force it to see the positive. When you write the positive first, you're actually creating a mindset to see the good that comes in the hard, that comes in the struggle, that comes in the friction where growth is born. When you write the negative, you're addressing the core of the thing that you are fearful for. And when you then go to reframed, you realize, oh, wait a second, I have the power to story tell how I can actually have something positive come from even the biggest thing I have in fear. And at the bottom of the page then, you get to reframe the thing that you represented at the top of the page was limiting, right? And so for me, I got to reframe my limiting beliefs. So what would I say? I'm already qualified to do this work because of all the experiences that I've had and my willingness to vulnerably share with others in this journey, even my failures, right? Like I fail all the time. I talk honestly about my failures all the time. It's part of why what I do works. Maybe I could write, the only way that I'm ever going to acquire the skills necessary for the audacity of the life I envision is to embrace failure because it's the vehicle that's actually going to help me grow. I could write, my ambition for impact may in fact come from sharing my experience of failure. Failure is so universal. It is the prerequisite for growth. And if I can share the failure that I had, maybe the impulse I have for impact, the mandate I have to try and serve, maybe talking about it turns something that may have otherwise been shameful into the brightest source of pride.
And Dave, you bring up a great point because, and I know you have mentors in your life and I have mentors in my life. And mentors, the reason we have them is they provide wisdom. They provide some really good, wise counsel. And one of the greatest mentors we can have is someone who's failed several times, because they teach us. Otherwise, if you ever want to help another person, the path towards getting to being a mentor, and for those of you on the call who are mentors, there's so much failure along the way.
Oh, it normalizes it. It makes you feel fine for it. It helps reinforce that the only way to actually become who you'd hope to become is if you are willing to reframe how you think about failure, the whole thing. I mean, I was the beneficiary in the mentor conversation of talking, to people who failed in starting businesses that have become something great. But my grandma just turned 99. She's a baller. She's, grumpy as can be. I love her like nothing else. And she and I had this conversation in the midst of this where she was like, hey, I can tell you, as a person who's lived through World War, buried 2 different husbands, raised 5 kids on my own, had to deal with mental health in our family, a whole host of things, that I have been through so many hard times. I've processed so much failure, and I have gone through and been on the other side of every single one of them stronger. And sometimes it just takes the reminder of someone who's lived a full life to remind you, you've already made it through 100% of your failures. You've already had 100% of your hardest days. You are here. And she's there to remind me, hey, 55 years from now, brother, you're still going to be standing after you faced every single thing that you failed through. All right, let's go fail. It changed a little bit of the conversation. All right, let's turn our attention to what can happen. Right? So what might happen? Yep, there's a huge ball of things that might happen. There's a small subset that can happen. There's a tiny dot that will happen. Okay. I recently got this text from my neighbor. It was a warning of sorts. It turned out that he saw a snake slithering on a path that borders our property. I live in the middle of nowhere, Texas. You said Austin. I live in a town called Dripping Springs. That is, as it sounds, it's like a Cars character. It's in the middle of nowhere. I live on a bigger piece of land. My property backs up.
You're running. Dave likes to run a lot on his Instagram. Like, I'll notice Dave's always running. And sometimes, I'm like, where is he? It looks like he's running through trails. It almost looks like one of those video games where half of it doesn't even seem real.
I am in the bush most of the time. It's crazy. The GPS is questionable in half of the places that I'm running. But he sent me this note, right? Hey, he thinks it's venomous. It was last seen heading into our yard. I've got 4 small kids, a mini schnauzer. I'm in the middle of nowhere, Texas. Be on the lookout for imminent danger. Okay. But what it made me aware of, in a way that I had not previously been aware of, as I should have been as a person who lives in the wilderness, on a piece of land that actually literally shares a boundary with a bison buffalo ranch, is that, of course, there have always been snakes present on this land. Right? The fact that I got visual confirmation of the snake, though, immediately changed the way that I was conscientious of the always present danger of snakes. It was now a thing that I had to be on the lookout for as we wandered out in the high grass out back in our adventures. And as much as I'm sure I would have previously on some theoretical level known that snakes could have been hiding, I hadn't previously been wearing boots. I wasn't keeping the kids from running after a ball into the brush. But now that I had confirmation of their existence, it just changed completely the way I took very seriously the very real dangers that existed in the middle of nowhere where tall grass grows. And as it turned out, right, I get this text in the middle of a global pandemic that we're all currently in the middle of experiencing. And the analogy really just crystallized in my mind that we were being given somewhat of a gift in a thing that nobody wants and everyone wants to go away. Visual confirmation of what can happen, right? If you had not previously given thought to an emergency savings, as it were, right? Emergency savings was a thing that, theoretically, everyone should have an emergency savings, but visual confirmation of what can happen inside of a pandemic when unemployment rates just go through the roof and uncertainty is as high as it is, that's the difference between sleeping well at night or not. Right? If you have the habits and routines that you need in good times, you might even trick yourself into believing that those habits and routines are there for the good times, but they are not. Your habits and routines are there to keep us going when we have to weather the storms in the bad. And the headline ends up being that reaching for the audacity of the vision that you cast on that blank piece of paper It requires that you do an inventory of the things that can happen along the way so that you can create the contingency plans to accommodate those possibilities of the possibility of things not going as you expect. Because when you're pushing into new terrain, choppy waters, leaving the harbor, nothing will go as you expect. Just expect that it won't go as you expect. If you're a sailor, who's a sailor here? No one's a sailor here. But if you're a sailor, right, there's like a pre-departure checklist that a good sailor goes through, right? It's the what if things go wrong catalog of supplies. It's like a GPS tracker, having a contact on the shore that always knows where you're at, extra food, water, change of clothes. Like all of that does what? It just creates a level of confidence and reinforces the courage that's required to head out to sea, knowing that irrespective of the conditions, they are ready. And you need to have that contingency plan of how you're going to handle what can happen so that irrespective of the conditions, you're ready. You don't know what the conditions will be when you push into new terrain. The antidote to fear is a plan. And it doesn't, like any antidote, doesn't make the disease go away, doesn't make the fear go away. But just knowing what will come up, what can come up on the journey, and preemptively considering how you're going to handle whatever presents itself is how you cultivate courage. It's how you become brave. It's how you keep your confidence in check, right? It doesn't make the fear go away, but it just lets you keep that confidence, maintain your confidence when you have to face what you don't see coming. So when you get going, like you decide to leave the harbor, you're going to push out into something new, you got to find a way to figure out, well, what are you going to do if you run into financial trouble? Because if you don't have an emergency fund established for some short-term storm, you can't leave the harbor, right? You can't be making decisions that are going to compromise your ability to maintain your responsibility to your family. If you're leaving familiar for unknown, you're going to find yourself triggered by insecurity. You're going to face imposter syndrome. Okay, that can happen and likely will. So what are the habits or the routines that you have to commit to right now so that when those feelings show up, if they do, and they will, but like if they do, that you know how to process them with positive coping mechanisms instead of booze or something else that isn't going to actually serve you? How are you going to handle failure along the way? Yeah, I just talked about failure. But if you think that you're just going to be the single person that gets to leave the harbor and push into something new and not experience failure, you're wrong. It's just an impossibility. You are wrong. So what kind of community are you going to surround yourself with to share the experience of your loss in a way that helps you normalize it, dust yourself off, get yourself back up? What kind of tools, resources are you going to invest in so that you can be ready to handle that failure when it comes? Look, I'm coaching out of a coaching. I am coaching out of this thing I do on Growth Day. I'm doing it in part because I want you guys to invest in coaching. Whether it's investing with Mike, investing with me, have a coach in your life that can help prepare you for how to handle failure. You want to be coached by me? growthday.com/Hollis. You want to be coached by Mike? You know Mike, but have a coach.
I'm good. No, Dave, this is my coaching, but I know, and we're out of time. And listen, it's mi casa, su casa. So like, there's no, in my world, it's all good. So we're all out of time, but I know a lot of people in the comments were going, gosh, we need another Dave Hollis Day. We want Dave to come back. There's so much. And I got to say, you gave more exercises, I think, than any guest we've had. And you gave so much great content that like you gave a huge foundation and a lot that we can all work through. Lee writes up all the notes, which will be in our Facebook group.
Mike, let me just throw one more thing for the last piece. I'm going to give you this last piece of homework because this is what can happen. Okay. Right. When you go back to your list of fears, right, and you've got those 20% of your warranted fears, I want you to find a way with financial, with health, and with relationships. Make a plan. What is your plan? What is your preparedness plan so that you can maintain your confidence as you walk toward what can happen? All right, sorry, Mike, you want to still cut me off early? That's fine. These people aren't getting their full money's worth, but that's okay. I'm joking.
No. We try to keep it only because sometimes we dip over. We dipped over a little today, but I mean, listen, this was extremely helpful. You have so much wisdom, and I do think that for people who are looking to get coached and looking to get more of what Dave offers, it's growthday.com/Hollis, you said?
That's right. Growthday.com. Look, you know what I made, Mike? You're gonna not believe this. Oh, look, it's a sign that says growthday.com/Hollis.
Yes.
Shameless plug for the coaching community.
Yeah, so Dave, I really appreciate you doing this with us. And I know hopefully when your next book comes out, you come back over with us and work it out with us. And
Mike, I want to come back as often as you'll have me. So for sure, 100%. I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you too. And so the best way to contact you is Facebook, Instagram, growthday.com.
Yep.
And I know a lot of you, I saw some of you are going to make YouTube videos even of what Dave was talking about. And make sure you share that, tag Dave, let him see what's going on. And thank you, man, for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. All right, we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, well, hey, I hope you guys enjoyed a little coaching. All right, look, he didn't let me finish. If you guys are still up for it, there's still 350 of you here. That's Mike Baer. He's the coach that is on, he's the coach for Dr. Oz. Isn't that rad? All right, so you know what? I don't know how much longer I can do this IGTV for, but I'm going to finish real quick with the last piece, what will happen, because I think it's important and I want to make sure that you can get this too. All right, so Steve Jobs gave one of the most incredible commencement speeches ever back in 2005 at Stanford University. It is arguably, sorry, Mike was trying to call. It's something that I think everyone should watch literally once a month. But he started the speech by saying this. When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like this. If you live each day as if it were your last, someday you will most certainly be right. It made an impression on me. And since then, for the last 33 years, I've looked myself in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer for too long had been no, I know I needed to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. So death is a guarantee. It is absolutely 100% going to happen. And what's crazy is that many of us spend a ton of our time worrying about dying, afraid of dying, when the promise of death should be the single thing that gives us life, that gives us permission to live, that maybe begs the mandate of living fully into the intention of a creator that put you on this planet for a very, very specific reason. Now, fear, right? Your fear, it can be a great motivator. And in fact, for me, it's a fear that I tap into a lot when I think about who I want to become. There are people who are driven by positive motivation, but I will tell you, I am driven by negative motivation a lot. And I do it through something called negative visualization. In the depths of my midlife crisis, I'm 45 now, just before I was 40. I absolutely 100% didn't know how to move forward. I had the job of everybody else's dreams. I was not fulfilled inside of it. I didn't know what to do and I was in a funk. So I cast a vision of my birthday dinner 20 years in advance. I had a visualization of what it would look like for me to be sitting around the table of my 60th birthday party. And in that visualization, there were one of two ways that it went. There was one where everyone was having just tears of pride, overflowing, abundance-filled, oh my goodness, this is the greatest day. We're raising a glass to Dave, who's meant so much in our life. The room is packed. It's overwhelming. Their tears meet my tears, long hugs. It's perfect. I am full for having lived a full life. They are full because of my full life. It's amazing. But the visualization that gets my running shoes on in the morning when I don't want to run, which is a lot of mornings, is the other way that dinner can go. It's the way that dinner could go where some of my then adult children do not show up to the dinner, where the room is not standing room only, but only a half full table. And instead of tears of joy, there are tears of pity, of regret for a life that could have been, of what might have been if I'd have chosen to show up for my life, if I'd chosen to push away my fear, if I'd chosen to handle my vices, if I'd chosen to live into and do the calling that has been put on me by the creator of the universe. And so I can connect to not wanting to show up at the second visualization of that birthday. Around the same time, not the same time, but I guess it's been 2 years ago now, my brother-in-law passed away unexpectedly. He's like, having a normal life, prison guard, had a long couple of shifts, came home, took a nap on his chair, didn't wake up, gone too soon. Destroyed our family, just grief through our family. We came to his funeral and we gathered around this beautiful ceremony. People are remembering his life. And at the end of the funeral, there was this slideshow set to his favorite music. And we sat there, everyone's just sobbing, tears everywhere. And I was struck with obviously this gratitude for having been able to know him and grief for his family. But also I was struck by this recognition that the video that will play at my funeral, the images that end up playing every day between this day and the end of my life, that is a visual that I control, that I command. And how good that video is, how moving it is, how many tears are flowing at the end of my life because of the way that visual has been created, that is in my hands. We have this family mantra that sits over our dining room table. And on it, among other things, are the words out of a Bible verse that read, "To whom much is given, much is expected." And I believe all of us have been given much. I believe in my core that the creator of the universe created you with intention. I believe that I was created with intention. And to honor the intention of my creator is something that I have the responsibility to do, the mandate to do between now and the end of my life, whether it's 60 or 100. I hope that it's 100 of trust. I want to live as long as I possibly can. But when I get to the end of my life, that visual of that movie that's playing at my funeral, it better be something that is worthy of honoring the creator's intention because of the way I chose every day to push past my fear and leave comfort and show up well for my life. And I argue that the same mandate exists for you as it does for me. Will it be easy? No. It will in fact be difficult, and you have to do it anyway. And some of you may be a little further along in age. You may be just a little bit older and have convinced yourself of a limiting belief that says, you know what, my best years are behind me. There's too much life lived. There's not enough life left. And that is garbage. I am sorry, that's garbage. And the thing is, I was doing a coaching a couple weekends back, and I had this as a pre-asked question, and I had to look up some examples to prove the garbageness of this idea. Julia Childs, one of the most famous cookbook people in the history of time, 50 years old when she made her first cookbook. Ray Kroc founded McDonald's at 52. Rodney Dangerfield's first stand-up, 46. Stan Lee, the greatest creator of intellectual property in the history of time, 39 was when he had his first comic made. Vera Wang didn't make her first dress until 40. Colonel Sanders didn't invent KFC until 62. Listen, I could go through 100 people who didn't create something meaningful that you love until after they were 50. So stop telling yourself the story that you're too old or don't have enough life left to have the kind of impact that you'd hope for. That is a lie from the devil. Goodness. The call to leave your comfort zone, it isn't so much an invitation as it is a mandate, right? You've got to be confident enough in yourself to go out and change the world with the gifts that you have been given, and do it in a way that embraces challenging your fears, putting on your confidence cape and doing the dang thing. There's this quote I love from Tim Ferriss. He said, "We fear the things we have to do the most." We fear the things we have to do the most. You have something inside of you, this intuition, the intuition that is whispering to you that you should do this thing that scares you. You need to listen to that intuition. You need to do the thing you fear the most. So at the end of Steve Jobs' speech, he finishes this speech, the 2005 Stanford commencement speech. Y'all need to listen to this speech tonight. He finished with these words: "No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it, and that's as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It is life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. And right now, the new is you." Hello? Right now, the new is you. "But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it is quite true. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. Somehow, they already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Goodness gracious, that whisper inside of you knows where you need to go. If you could just be confident enough in yourself to listen to it." Isn't the dogma line good? Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Hello? Hello? Is this thing on? Is this even working? Here's the thing. I can condense it into an even simpler way because I love Shawshank Redemption so much. Andy Dufresne once said, "Get busy living or get busy dying." Living it is. For me, I'm going to go be living, and I want to encourage you to go live too. So the last thing, because you guys made it to the end. You can't see it because it's backwards on Instagram, even though it's the right side in the Zoom. It says, your toast in 20 years. It says the video that plays in your funeral. I want you to actually write down who you hope shows up at your toast, at your birthday in 20 years. And who says what? What do they say? Like very, very specifically, what do they say? How do they say the things that they say? How does it make you feel to hear the words that they say? And then, I know this is the part that is hard, what would you have to do to actually have them say those things between now and 20 years from now? What would you have to say yes to? What fear would you have to face? How confident would you have to be? I mean, please. And then second, what's the video that plays at your funeral? What are the dreams that you don't want to die with? What are the dreams that you don't want to die with? Are they going to be in the video? Are you going to get there at the end and have people crying because of the impact you made for that thing that's been living inside of you that you know was put there by the creator of the universe? The intention of your creator, you're going to honor that intention? Yikes. That's big. That's big. But if you can visualize the video that's going to be playing at your funeral, you get to ask the question of what it might take to have that video play. All right. If you like this, if there's something you took away from this, I know this is a long video. No one's going to watch an hour-long IGTV. Tell them something specific in this video that you thought was worthy of them taking something away from, and share it with them. And if you're interested in being coached by me once a month inside of a community called Growth Day. I have pinned the link, growthday.com/Hollis. When you jump into the community, yep, you get to have coaching with me every Tuesday. It's live. It's fantastic. But also, you get Brendan Burchard once a month. You get Mel Robbins once a month. You get Jenna Kutcher once a month. You get David Bach once a month. There's like 10 unbelievable people that are coaching. It's less than $1 a day. If you are interested in growth, if you want to be encouraged by people who truly are here, I am here. Yeah, I want to provide for my family. I'm not here for the money. I want you to pay for it, but I'm not here for the money as much as I am here to afford people breakthroughs and impact so that you might believe as much in unlocking the gifts in your life as I have become a believer in unlocking mine. So, if you're interested, jump in. I know that it will be worth your time and your money. All right, y'all, have a fantastic, what day is it? Tuesday night.